They were laughing when I leaned across the table and carefully wiped red sauce from my wife's cheek. That sound is what I remember most. Not the plates hitting the table. Not the low music coming through the restaurant speakers. Not even the shocked whispers coming from the people sitting around us. The laughter. My daughter-in-law actually laughed while my wife sat there with tomato sauce dripping from her gray hair onto the blue blouse she'd spent 20 minutes ironing before we left the house. My son didn't laugh. Somehow, what he did was worse. He looked at his mother and told her she had brought it on herself. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I didn't threaten anybody. I simply cleaned my wife's face, helped her put on her coat, walked her outside, and made one phone call from the parking lot. By Monday morning, my son and his wife would begin learning something I should have taught them years earlier. There is a difference between a quiet man and a weak man. My name is Richard Palmer. I'm 66 years old, and I've lived outside Raleigh, North Carolina, for most of my adult life. My wife, Ellen, likes to joke that I have 3 moods: calm, tired, and asleep. She's not entirely wrong. I've never been a man who enjoys shouting. I spent nearly 40 years working in commercial property law. When you've spent that much time sitting across conference tables from developers, bankers, contractors, and attorneys who think raising their voice makes their argument stronger, you learn something. Noise usually means somebody has run out of better options. Documents don't shout. Numbers don't lose their temper. Consequences don't need to make speeches. Ellen and I had been married 39 years when all this happened. 39 years. I once calculated how many mornings that was, and somewhere around 13,000 I stopped because the number itself didn't matter. What mattered was that after all those years, I could still wake up, turn my head, see that woman sleeping beside me, and know I'd choose her again. Ellen is one of those people who remembers things nobody else remembers. Your birthday, your favorite pie, the name of the teacher you mentioned once 6 months ago. She sends thank you cards by mail because she says a text message feels lazy. She keeps extra umbrellas in the car because somebody always forgets one. She volunteers twice a month at a food pantry and somehow comes home knowing the life story of every person she worked beside. She's also the kind of woman who can be deeply hurt and still ask whether the person who hurt her has eaten dinner. That quality is beautiful. It can also make people believe they can keep hurting you without consequences. For too long, I helped them believe that. Our only son, Nathan, was 35. Nathan had always been a good kid. Not perfect. No child is. But good. He worked summers starting at 16. Ellen and I paid for his college because we were fortunate enough to afford it, and I didn't want him entering adulthood carrying $80,000 of debt. He graduated, worked hard, and eventually found his way into corporate event production. He had a natural talent for it. He could walk into an empty ballroom and immediately see where the stage should go, how the lighting should look, where the tables belonged, what kind of music would fit the crowd. People liked working with him. He was organized without being controlling and confident without being arrogant. At least he used to be. Then he met Vanessa. Vanessa Cole became Vanessa Palmer about 4 years before the restaurant incident. The first time Nathan brought her to our house, I liked her. I really did. She was attractive, polished, smart, and direct. She shook my hand firmly, looked me straight in the eye, and asked intelligent questions about my work. I remember telling Ellen after they left, "That girl knows exactly what she wants." Ellen smiled and said, "That can be a good thing." It can. It can also be dangerous when what someone wants is control. The changes were tiny at first. So tiny that if you pointed to any single one, you'd sound ridiculous. Vanessa interrupting Ellen during dinner. Vanessa checking her phone while Ellen was telling a story. Vanessa rolling her eyes when Ellen talked about gardening. Vanessa correcting Nathan over meaningless details. "No, that's not what happened. No, Nathan, you're remembering it wrong. No, don't tell the story like that." Little things. Then the little things grew teeth. One Christmas, Ellen was telling Nathan about an old family recipe she'd found in her mother's cookbook. Vanessa sighed loudly and said, "Nathan, does every conversation with your mother have to last 40 minutes? The room went quiet. Ellen smiled. That's what she did when she was embarrassed. She smiled. Nathan looked down at his plate. I waited for him to say something. He didn't. That should have been the moment I stepped in. Instead, I told myself Nathan was an adult. It was his marriage. I didn't want to interfere. That phrase, "I don't want to interfere," became the excuse I used for more than a year. Vanessa became more comfortable criticizing Ellen. Nathan became more comfortable allowing it. And I became more skilled at pretending I wasn't watching my family change. The hardest part was what happened to Nathan. He'd always been easygoing, but there was a difference between easygoing and submissive. He started watching Vanessa before answering questions. If Ellen invited them somewhere, Nathan would say, "Let me check." Not his calendar. Vanessa. If Vanessa criticized Ellen, Nathan would either remain silent or add something small to support her. Mom can be a little sensitive. Mom worries too much. You know how Mom gets. Every sentence sounded harmless by itself. Together, they built a wall. Ellen rarely complained. Sometimes after Nathan called, I'd find her standing at the kitchen sink staring through the window. I'd ask, "Everything okay?" She'd say, "Of course." And because I wanted the answer to be true, I accepted it. That was my mistake. The dinner happened in early December. Nathan called me on a Wednesday. "Dad, Vanessa and I were thinking we should all have dinner. Just the four of us. Clear the air a little." Those words immediately bothered me. Clear the air. People usually say that when they've already decided who polluted it. Still, I agreed. When I told Ellen, hope appeared on her face before she could hide it. "Maybe Vanessa wants to start over," she said. "Maybe. I don't want things to stay like this forever." Neither did I. So that Saturday evening, I put on a sport coat. Ellen wore her favorite pale blue blouse, and we drove downtown. Nathan had chosen Bellini's, an Italian restaurant near Fayetteville Street. It wasn't cheap. Ellen loved the place because we'd celebrated our 35th anniversary there. At the time, I thought Nathan choosing it was thoughtful. Later I realized Vanessa probably wanted somewhere public. Somewhere with witnesses. An audience. We arrived a few minutes before 7. Nathan and Vanessa were already seated. A bottle of red wine had been opened. Nathan stood when we approached. He hugged his mother first, then me. Vanessa stayed seated. She looked Ellen up and down and said, "You look exhausted." That was her greeting. Ellen gave a little laugh. December always gets busy. I sat down and told myself not to react. For the first half hour, things were surprisingly normal. We talked about Ellen's volunteer work. We talked about football. We talked about a trip Ellen and I were considering taking to Charleston in the spring. Then Nathan started talking about his company. 3 years earlier, he'd come to me with a proposal. He wanted to leave his employer and start an event production company with Vanessa. They had contacts. They had experience. They had potential clients. What they didn't have was capital. Nathan asked whether I'd consider investing. I told him I'd think about it. What I actually did was spend 2 weeks reviewing his projections. And I liked what I saw. So I loaned them $290,000. Not gave. Loaned. That's important. Nathan's company grew quickly. By the time of that dinner, they'd booked their biggest event yet, a huge New Year's Eve celebration at a luxury hotel downtown. Nathan was telling us about lighting rigs, musicians, food vendors, and corporate sponsors. He looked alive. For 10 minutes, I saw my old son again. He was excited, confident, funny. Ellen was smiling at him. And I remember thinking maybe we'd been wrong. Maybe this dinner really was an attempt to fix things. Then Vanessa picked up her phone. She had been unusually quiet for several minutes. I should have known that meant something. She tapped the screen and pushed the phone across the table toward Ellen. Nathan immediately stopped talking. He looked down, not at the phone, at his glass. That told me everything. Whatever was about to happen, he knew. Vanessa folded her hands. "I think it's time we address this." Ellen looked at the phone. I leaned slightly closer. There was a text message on the screen. It had been sent months earlier by Ellen's older sister, Patricia. Patricia lives near Wilmington. She's 63, retired from nursing, and has never possessed the ability to pretend she likes someone. The message said, "Don't disrespect my sister again." That was all. 5 words. I knew nothing about it. Apparently, months earlier, after one particularly ugly family gathering, Ellen had called Patricia from her car. Vanessa had spent most of the evening making little remarks about Ellen's clothes, her cooking, her habit of asking Nathan whether he was eating properly. Ellen had laughed through it. Then she'd driven away, pulled into a grocery store parking lot, and called her sister. Patricia listened. Then Patricia sent Vanessa that message. No threats. No insults. Just a boundary. Vanessa had saved it for months. Waiting. "Your sister sent this to me," Vanessa said. Ellen stared at the screen. "I know. Because you've been talking about me behind my back. I talked to my sister because I was upset. You've been trying to turn Nathan against me." Ellen looked confused. "No, Vanessa, that's not what." You make yourself the victim constantly. I watched Ellen's expression change. The humiliation wasn't loud. That's the thing about real humiliation. Sometimes it looks like a person becoming very still. Ellen glanced at Nathan. Nathan? Vanessa looked at him too. Not lovingly. Expectantly. It was a command without words. Nathan swallowed. Then my son looked at his mother and said, "She's not completely wrong, Mom." I felt something cold move through me. Ellen blinked. What? You've caused a lot of tension between us. I never wanted to cause tension. Then maybe you shouldn't have been discussing our marriage with Aunt Patricia. I wasn't discussing your marriage. I was talking about how hurt I was. The restaurant around us had started getting quieter. The couple at the table beside us had stopped talking. A waiter approached, sensed something was wrong, and changed direction. Vanessa leaned back. Hurt. You're always hurt. That's the problem. Everyone has to manage Susan. She stopped herself, then corrected Ellen's name and laughed. It wasn't funny. Nobody else laughed. Ellen said softly, "I have never asked you to manage me." Vanessa stood. There was a large serving bowl in the middle of the table. We'd ordered pasta for everyone to share. Most of it was gone, but there was still plenty of sauce left. I saw Vanessa reach for the bowl. My mind understood what she was doing a fraction of a second before my body did. But it was too late. She lifted it and poured the remaining pasta and sauce over my wife's head. Slowly. That matters. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It wasn't somebody losing control for half a second. She deliberately tilted that bowl and emptied it. Red sauce ran through Ellen's silver hair. A piece of pasta landed on her shoulder. Sauce rolled down her cheek and onto the blouse she'd carefully ironed that afternoon. The entire restaurant became silent. Vanessa put the bowl back on the table. Then she sat down. She adjusted the front of her dress and said, "Maybe now you'll learn to stay out of our marriage." Ellen didn't move. Her hands rested flat against the table. I could see them trembling. I looked at Nathan. I waited. There are moments when you can watch a person's entire character being decided in front of you. This was one. Nathan could have stood up. He could have apologized. He could have handed his mother a napkin. He could have told his wife she'd crossed a line. Instead, he said, "Mom, you kept pushing her. What did you expect?" That sentence ended something. Not my love for my son. A father doesn't turn that off like a light switch. But my willingness to protect him from himself ended right there. I felt anger. More anger than I've ever felt in my life. I imagined grabbing the table and turning it over. I imagined shouting. I imagined saying things to Vanessa that would have followed us all forever. Then I looked at Ellen. She was sitting there, humiliated in front of 50 strangers, still refusing to give Vanessa the scene she wanted. And I realized something. If my wife could maintain her dignity, I could maintain mine. I stood. I took my napkin. I walked around the table and gently wiped sauce from Ellen's face. That's when Vanessa laughed. A short little laugh. Like the whole thing was entertaining. I ignored her. I cleaned Ellen's cheek. I removed a piece of pasta from her hair. Then I helped her stand. I picked up her purse. I took her coat from the back of the chair and buttoned it over her ruined blouse. Before leaving, I looked at Nathan once. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. He couldn't hold my eyes. We walked through the restaurant. Nobody spoke. A woman near the entrance looked at Ellen with tears in her eyes. The hostess whispered, "I'm so sorry." Ellen nodded. We stepped outside. The December air felt colder than it had when we'd arrived. I opened Ellen's door. She got inside. I closed it. Then I walked around the car, sat behind the wheel, and took out my phone. I called Martin Shaw. Martin had been my closest friend for almost 40 years. We'd met in law school. He was also the attorney who handled most of my personal financial agreements after I retired. He answered on the third ring. "Richard." "Martin." Something in my voice must have told him this wasn't a social call. "What happened?" "I need you to activate Section 12 of Nathan's business loan." Silence. Then he asked, "Full balance. Every dollar." Another pause. "You sure?" I looked at Ellen. She was staring straight ahead. Sauce still stained the collar of her coat. "Yes." "All right," Martin said. "I'll start Monday." I hung up. Ellen didn't ask me anything. Not yet. We drove. About 10 minutes later, while we were stopped at a traffic light, she started crying. Quietly. She turned toward the window, as if she was embarrassed for me to see. After 39 years. I reached across the console and took her hand. I didn't tell her everything would be okay. I didn't say Nathan didn't mean it. I didn't make excuses. Sometimes words are just another way of trying to escape somebody else's pain. So I held her hand. When we got home, Ellen went upstairs to shower. I stayed in the kitchen. Our house was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The old clock above the doorway ticked. Those ordinary sounds hit me harder than I expected. This was the house where Nathan had learned to walk. The kitchen where Ellen had packed his lunches. The table where we'd helped him with homework. And years later, the same table where he'd signed the documents that were about to change his life. Ellen came downstairs wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. She sat across from me. "What did you do?" I looked at her. "I called Martin." Her expression changed. "Richard." "I called the business loan." She closed her eyes for a second. "How much?" "The outstanding balance is around $280,000. All of it. All of it." She stared at the table. "I don't want to ruin Nathan." "Neither do I." "It sounds like you do." "No." I leaned forward. "I've spent years preventing him from experiencing consequences. That's different." She looked at me. I continued. "When Nathan started the company, he asked us for money. I gave it because I believed in him, but I didn't give him a gift. Martin had prepared the agreement. $290,000. Properly documented. Signed. Notarized. Section 12 contained a callable loan provision. At my discretion, I could demand repayment of the remaining balance with 30 days' notice. Nathan had signed it. So had Vanessa. Neither had read the agreement carefully. They'd been too excited. I remembered watching Vanessa flip through the pages while Martin showed her where to initial. At the time, I almost told her to slow down. Then I thought, they're family. We'll never need this. Funny how often trouble hides behind the sentence, "We'll never need this." Ellen rubbed her forehead. "He's still our son." "I know. What if he loses everything? Then we'll find out what he is when everything we handed him isn't holding him up anymore." She didn't answer. I reached across the table. "I'm not closing our door to Nathan. I'm closing our wallet." That distinction mattered to me. It mattered even more later. Monday morning, Martin sent formal notice. The remaining business loan balance was due within 30 days. At 10:30, Vanessa called his office. Martin called me afterward. "Your daughter-in-law believes the agreement is unenforceable." "Does she?" "Very strongly." I laughed for the first time since Saturday. "What did you tell her?" "I suggested she hire an attorney." That's it. That's it. Tuesday afternoon, Nathan called. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" I was in the garage sorting tools. "I'm organizing screwdrivers." "You know what I mean." "Yes." "Vanessa says this loan thing is insane." "It's not insane. You can't suddenly demand almost $300,000. "I can. I'm your son." "I know. Then why are you doing this?" I put the screwdriver down. "Because I watched your wife pour food over your mother's head while you told your mother she deserved it." Silence. Then Vanessa's voice appeared faintly in the background. I couldn't hear every word, but I could hear enough to know she was telling him what to say. Nathan returned. "So what do you want? An apology?" "No." "What then?" "I want nothing from you right now." That confused him. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't want an apology you give because your bank account is frozen. I don't want flowers purchased because you're afraid of losing your business. I don't want words bought with financial pressure." "Then why call the loan?" "Because the money was mine, Nathan. The business is yours. For 3 years, you've been living as though those two facts were the same thing." He didn't answer. I continued. "I protected you too much. Every time life became difficult, your mother and I softened the landing. College, the business, the house, emergency expenses. We told ourselves that was love. It was. Some of it was. Some of it was fear. We were afraid to watch you struggle. Dad, I think you need to struggle now." I ended the call. 2 days later, the company's operating accounts were restricted as the collection process moved forward. That created immediate problems. Nathan's company had vendors waiting for deposits, venues expecting payment, contractors expecting checks. And the biggest problem was the New Year's Eve event. Without access to operating capital, they couldn't make several major vendor deposits. The client didn't wait. Why would they? They hired another company. In less than a week, Nathan lost the biggest contract his business had ever won. He called Thursday night. His voice had changed. The anger was gone. "Dad, we lost the New Year's event. I'm sorry." "You don't sound sorry." "I am sorry you're hurting." "That's not the same thing." "No, it isn't." He breathed heavily. "We're going to lose the company." "Maybe." "How can you say that?" "Because I don't know whether you'll lose it. You caused this." "No, Nathan." I stopped preventing it. That made him angry again, but not as angry as before. I could hear something else underneath it. Fear. Then something happened that none of us expected. 3 years earlier, when Nathan and Vanessa bought their house in Cary, I had provided $110,000 toward the purchase. Vanessa apparently believed that money had been a gift. It wasn't. Martin had insisted we document it as a deferred family loan secured by a lien against the property. Again, I hadn't done that because I distrusted them. It was simply how I operated. If money changed hands, paperwork followed. A few months before the restaurant incident, Vanessa had begun trying to refinance the house. She wanted access to the equity. According to documents her lender later encountered, she planned to use part of that money to fund another business venture, one that didn't involve Nathan. The lender discovered my lien. The refinance stopped. Then Martin learned something else. Vanessa had been preparing financially for a separation. For months. While Nathan was defending her to us, she was building an exit. When Martin told me, I sat alone in my truck for several minutes. I expected to feel satisfied. I didn't. I felt sick. Because Nathan was still my son. And whatever he'd done, I knew what discovering that kind of betrayal would do to him. He found out 2 weeks later. It was a Friday evening when my phone rang. Nathan, Dad. His voice sounded strange. Where are you? Parking lot. What parking lot? Gas station off Capitol Boulevard. What happened? For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then he said, Vanessa wants a divorce. I closed my eyes. Are you sure? She gave me papers. His voice cracked. She already had them prepared. I said nothing. Her attorney wasn't our attorney, Nathan continued. He was hers. The whole time. There are times when being right gives you no pleasure at all. This was one of them. She'd been planning it before dinner, he said. I know. Silence. What? I found out recently. You knew? Not until after everything happened. He breathed into the phone. I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot. I defended her. Yes. I defended her against Mom. Yes. God. Then he said the sentence I'd been waiting years to hear. Not because I wanted the satisfaction. Because I wanted my son back. What have I done? I sat quietly. Finally I asked, where are you sleeping tonight? I don't know. Do you have clothes? A bag. Then drive here. Another silence. Dad, after what I said to Mom. Drive home, Nathan. I don't know if she'll want me there. That's for your mother to decide. And you? You're my son. He arrived around 9. I heard his truck before he knocked. When I opened the door, Nathan was standing under the porch light with a duffel bag in one hand. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red. He looked older than 35. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I stepped aside. He entered the house. Ellen was in the kitchen. She must have heard the truck too. She stood beside the counter holding a dish towel. Nathan stopped in the doorway. I stayed several steps behind him. He looked at his mother. She looked at him. That kitchen held almost his entire life. Birthday cakes. School projects. Christmas mornings. Arguments over curfews. College acceptance letters. The business loan. Everything. Nathan dropped the bag. Then he walked toward Ellen. He didn't give a speech. He didn't explain Vanessa. He didn't blame stress. He didn't blame me. He simply fell to his knees in front of his mother. I'm sorry. Ellen's mouth tightened. Nathan looked down. Mom, I'm so sorry. His voice broke. I watched her do that to you. Ellen's eyes filled. I sat there. He covered his face. And then I blamed you. Ellen didn't move at first. Nathan kept talking. I don't know why I said it. That's not true. I do know. I was afraid of going home with Vanessa angry at me. I cared more about keeping her calm than protecting you. That was the most truthful thing he'd said in years. I'm sorry. Ellen finally reached down. She put her hand against the back of his head. Nathan leaned into her. Then she pulled him against her. My 35-year-old son cried against his mother's chest like he was 8 years old again. Ellen cried too. I went outside. Some moments don't need an audience. I sat on the back porch. There was an oak tree near the fence that Nathan and I had planted when he was 5. It had been barely taller than he was. Now its branches stretched above the roof. I sat there thinking about how strange parenthood is. You spend years teaching a child to walk away from you. Then you spend the rest of your life hoping they remember the way home. About 20 minutes later, Ellen opened the door. Richard. I looked up. Come inside. Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table. I made coffee. Nobody really wanted coffee, but making coffee is what men like me do when emotions become too large. Nathan talked for nearly 2 hours. He told us about the marriage, how it changed slowly, how Vanessa never demanded that he abandon us. Not directly. Instead, every visit became an argument afterward. Every phone call with Ellen created tension. Every holiday became a negotiation. If Nathan defended his mother, Vanessa accused him of choosing Ellen over his wife. So Nathan learned the easiest way to keep peace. He stopped defending Ellen. Then he started agreeing with Vanessa. Then he started believing some of it. One compromise at a time, he said. That's usually how it happens, I replied. I don't know who I became. I thought about that. You didn't become somebody else. He looked at me. You behaved like somebody else. What's the difference? The difference is whether you keep doing it. He stared at his coffee. How do I fix it? You don't. His face fell. Then I added, not all at once. He looked up. You don't fix 3 years with one apology. You fix it Sunday after Sunday. Birthday after birthday. Ordinary Tuesday after ordinary Tuesday. He listened. You call your mother when you don't need something. You show up when nobody asks you. You keep promises. You become reliable again. How long? As long as it takes. What if Mom never completely forgives me? Then you respect that too. Ellen reached across the table. She placed her hand over Nathan's. I already forgive you, she said. Nathan started crying again. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm not hurt. I know. No, she said gently. I don't think you do yet. Nathan nodded. Then I'll learn. That was the beginning, not the ending. Vanessa's divorce moved quickly. She had prepared most of it already. What she hadn't prepared for was the financial reality. The house wasn't the pile of free equity she'd imagined. My lien was valid. The business was collapsing. There were cancellation penalties from contracts they could no longer fulfill. Legal fees accumulated. The house eventually had to be sold. After the mortgage, liens, and expenses were settled, very little remained. Vanessa moved to Charlotte the following spring. I heard she started working with a marketing firm there. I haven't spoken to her since. And I don't need to. People sometimes assume revenge means you spend years enjoying somebody else's suffering. I didn't. I stopped thinking about Vanessa surprisingly quickly. My attention was on Nathan. The company closed. That hurt him. But losing it may have saved him. For the first time in years, he had to build something without my money underneath it. He rented a modest apartment. He found work as a project manager with a construction services company. The salary wasn't spectacular. The apartment didn't have granite countertops. His truck was 6 years old, and I've never seen him happier. He called Ellen every Sunday. Every Sunday. At first I could tell he was doing it because I told him consistency mattered. Then something changed. The calls became natural. Sometimes they'd talk for an hour. Sometimes 10 minutes. Sometimes Nathan would call just to ask how her tomatoes were doing. Ellen started smiling when her phone rang on Sundays. That alone was worth more than the money I'd lost. Nathan also started coming over. Not dramatically. That's important. Real change is usually boring. One Saturday, he replaced a broken fence board. Another weekend, he helped me clear leaves. Once he drove 40 minutes because Ellen mentioned the garbage disposal was making a strange sound. It took him 12 minutes to fix. Then he stayed for dinner. About 10 months after the restaurant incident, Nathan and I finally replaced the porch light I'd been complaining about for years. It should have taken 45 minutes. It took almost 4 hours. I bought the wrong mounting bracket. Then Nathan dropped one of the screws into the bushes. Then the hardware store didn't have the part we needed. At some point, we were standing in aisle 12 staring at 2 nearly identical electrical boxes. Nathan looked at me. I looked at him. He started laughing. I did too. For no reason. Just 2 grown men laughing in a hardware store because the day had become ridiculous. And suddenly I saw him. Not the man sitting silently across from me in that restaurant. My son. The boy who used to follow me around the garage asking what every tool did. He'd been there the whole time. Buried. But there. Thanksgiving came around again. For the first time in years, it was peaceful. Just the 3 of us. Ellen cooked too much food, as always. Nathan brought a pecan pie from a bakery. I tried making one, he said, setting the box on the counter, but it looked like something investigators would photograph, so I bought this. Ellen laughed. Not politely. Really laughed. Her whole face changed. I stood there watching them and felt something inside me finally settle. Later that night, after Nathan left, Ellen and I sat on the porch. She leaned against me. Do you regret it? She asked. The loan. Everything. I thought for a while. No. She nodded. but I regret waiting so long." She turned toward me. "What do you mean?" "I should have confronted Nathan earlier." "Maybe." I kept telling myself I was respecting his marriage. "You were trying not to lose him." That sentence hit me, because she was right. I had called my silence wisdom. It wasn't. I was afraid. I thought if I confronted Nathan, he'd pull farther away. So I allowed Ellen to absorb the cost of keeping him close. That wasn't fair. I should have protected you. Ellen squeezed my hand. "You did. Too late." Late isn't the same as never. That's Ellen. She can fit more wisdom into 6 words than I managed in 40 years of legal briefs. I spent most of my professional life preparing for problems. Contracts, contingencies, liens, default clauses, exit provisions. I believed every important risk could be managed if the paperwork was strong enough. And yes, the paperwork mattered. Without those agreements, Vanessa might have walked away with money she believed belonged to her. Nathan might have continued living inside a life built on our financial protection. Section 12 did exactly what it was designed to do. But paperwork didn't bring my son back. Consequences opened the door. Nathan walked through it. And his mother was waiting on the other side. That's the part people misunderstand. I didn't take everything from Nathan because I hated him. I stopped carrying everything because I loved him. There's a difference. Sometimes protecting someone from every fall only teaches them they don't need to watch where they're walking. Sometimes keeping peace isn't peace. It's fear wearing a polite shirt. And sometimes the quietest person at the table isn't quiet because he has nothing to say. He's quiet because he's still deciding whether the situation can be repaired without him standing up. That night in the restaurant, I finally stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten Vanessa. I didn't humiliate my son in front of strangers. I wiped my wife's face. I helped her into her coat. I walked her to the car. Then I made one phone call. That's all. One call. One decision to stop shielding grown adults from the consequences of their choices. Almost a year later, I was standing in my kitchen watching Ellen argue with Nathan about whether his store-bought pie counted as bringing dessert. Nathan insisted it did. Ellen insisted buying dessert was not the same as making dessert. He looked at me for help. I raised both hands. "I'm retired from law. I'm not getting involved." Ellen laughed. Nathan laughed. And I thought about that restaurant. The sauce. The silence. The look on my wife's face. The look on my son's face. For months I'd wished I could erase that night. Now I understood I wouldn't erase it even if I could. I would change parts of what came before. I would speak sooner. I would stop pretending silence was neutrality. But that night exposed everything we'd been refusing to see. It exposed Vanessa. It exposed Nathan. And it exposed me. Sometimes a family doesn't heal because everybody avoids the breaking point. Sometimes healing begins because the breaking point finally arrives and nobody can pretend anymore. I'm 66 now. I've learned that age doesn't automatically make a man wise. Sometimes it simply gives him enough mistakes to finally recognize a pattern. My mistake was believing love meant making life easier for the people I cared about. It doesn't. Not always. Sometimes love means letting someone carry the weight of what they've done. Sometimes love means opening your door when they finally understand it. And sometimes love means sitting quietly on a back porch while your grown son cries in his mother's arms, because that conversation belongs to them. Nathan still calls every Sunday. Last Sunday, Ellen talked to him for 47 minutes. I know because I was waiting for her so we could go to lunch. When she finally hung up, I asked, "Everything okay?" She smiled. "Everything's getting there." Getting there. I like that. Not perfect. Not forgotten. Not magically repaired. Getting there. Maybe that's what family really is. Not people who never hurt one another. People who finally decide that love requires more than saying they're family. It requires showing up. Again, and again, and again. So if you're listening to my story, I want to ask you something. If someone you loved stood by while their partner publicly humiliated your spouse, would you have given them another chance? Or would that restaurant have been the last time they ever sat at your table?